Sorry, my microphone wasn't on. So welcome to the meeting. Now that we've got a quorum, so start with the karakia, whakataka taho ki te uru, whakataka taho ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tarata ki tai. E hi aki ana te etakura, he tio, he huka, he heihu, ti he moriora. So, apologies. I've got Mayor Broughton, Councillor Miller and Councillor Mugford. Are there any more apologies that anyone knows about? No, so I'll move those apologies. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Sophie. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Any extraordinary business anyone wants to bring up? No. We'll go on to the next item, conflicts of interest. Anyone have any conflicts with this agenda? No. Next one is public forum. Sienna, do you want to come up here and talk to your thing? Might want to just, Shane, do you want to move just the boards out of the way for now? It's for the next one. Boards, yeah. So thanks, Sienna. You've got 10 minutes, and that includes any time for questions.
Okay, have I pressed the right button?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, kia ora everybody, ko Sienna Fitzjohn aho. I've lived in Selwyn since I was 10 years old and I'm 32 now, so that's a little while, and it's a pleasure to be here in Waikirikiri District. Thank you for having me to talk today. My background is in science communication. I did a master's in Otago and my undergrad's in philosophy and geography, and so some of that feeds into what I'm going to talk about today, which is tree loss in the Waikirikiri District. If a tree falls in the forest, other trees are listening. This is a quote by Peter Wohlleben, who wrote The Hidden Life of Trees. And this book takes us through the scientific discoveries showing us how trees feel, communicate, and take care of one another. Wohlleben shares what he lays out how a forest of trees is akin to a social network, with trees sharing information with one another about seasons and dangers, and sharing nutrients via mycorrhizal networks and this network of roots between the soil and the soil between them. He demonstrates how mother trees recognise and talk with their saplings, shaping future generations, how injured trees pass on legacies to their neighbours, affecting gene regulation, defence chemistry and resilience in the forest. He also says, when you know that trees experience pain and have memories, that the tree parents live together with their children, then you can no longer just chop them down and disrupt their lives with larger machines. Yet, unfortunately, that's not the case. We can chop them down, and we do in large numbers all the time. And we're doing so across this district in huge numbers. And I think it's been largely undocumented. And that's why I think it's really important and salient to bring it to public forum today when you're going to be talking about climate change and resilience. Because I think we're in danger of losing massive amounts of our tree cover in this district, and I think that not enough is being done to prevent that from happening. So I'd like to share a couple of stories because they help highlight why I think this issue is important. So about 10 years ago, we came home and a number of really big and really beautiful trees were cut down just along the border of our property. So they were between the water race and our fence by the council. And this is not me holding a 10-year grudge, although there might be a little bit of that. Some are cherry plum trees, some are willows. And one was a willow tree that stretched across the water race. And as a child, I'd lie on the trunk over the water surrounded by a canopy in a little hidden world that felt like it was all mine. And when we came home to find the trees cut down without any warning whatsoever, I was devastated. But when I called the council up and I was almost incoherent with fury, the blunt and completely uncomprehending answer I got was, but the trees aren't yours. And so this highlights the way that we often prioritize ownership over relationship. And yeah, I think this demonstrates something that I see repeated over and over, and that's other people not understanding how much trees can come to mean to people and how important they are. And that's not just on an ecological level, but a deeply emotional level. Because in that moment, it was like losing a friend who I'd spent a lot of time with. And at that time, the council couldn't understand my reaction. They couldn't understand that relationship. And that sort of underpins why I wanted to come here today. And another story that sums up why this issue is important is a few weeks ago, I was driving down Clinton's Road, which is near me, and I came across people cutting down a big poplar tree. And I was like, right, okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to confront them about this, because usually when I drive around this region, you're only seeing the aftermath. So you're only seeing stumps of incredibly beautiful mature trees that have been cut down. And all you can do is kind of brace yourself against the tide of hopelessness that brings, because it really feels like a violation when I see a tree cut down. It's quite nauseating. But this time I was like, oh, fantastic. I can actually, I can actually confront people doing this. So I pulled over and I just politely went over and said, why are you cutting this tree down? And the head arborist was really nice. He came over and he was like, yeah, the reason we're cutting down is that it's rotted through the middle and it's in danger of falling over. And I said, well, that sounds like it's fair enough. I was like, but I'm just devastated by how many trees are being lost around this region all the time. There are so many. And he said, I completely agree with you. I've been in this profession for 20 years and I'm just about at the end of my tether. I want to leave because of how many trees are being cut down all over the place. So that was someone who's been in the industry for a long time, whose job it is to cut down trees and whose job it is to take care of trees. And they are disgusted by what's happening. So I think the extent of the mature tree loss, I want to mention that, like, this is, Waikirikiri is a place that has experienced a huge amount of land change after colonisation. So we can only imagine what the native tree cover would have looked like here before that happened, which is devastating. And so I'm acknowledging that a lot of the mature trees that I'm talking about, they are not native trees, they are exotic trees. But the fact that we have so few mature trees left in Selwyn, like, we've turned this into a monocrop. We've turned it into an industrial agricultural landscape where trees are excluded. At the moment, I think, though, even those exotic trees, even though they're not native trees, they still are important because we don't have that many mature trees left. And we're going to take away from future generations what it's like to be in the presence of a big tree, and to experience that. So I think we need to prioritise native tree planting and native regeneration of biodiversity at every opportunity, but we still need to do something to protect the mature trees that we do have left, because I took a couple of photos even on my drive down here, and every time I drive down there's new trees being cut down. I nearly got run over by a logging truck actually as I took the photo, which is somewhat ironic. But it's important as you're talking about climate resilience today, because we are in the middle of a biodiversity crisis. We are losing trees. Trees are our biggest ally when it comes to climate change. And not only that, and I don't think that we should just see trees as, in terms of their utility and what they do for us, because I think that's actually a really damaging way to view other beings. But I think we need to realise that we're going to experience more and more heat waves because of climate change, and we are cutting down our shade source, and it is a really strange thing to do. Trees provide shade, they provide shelter, and not only that, they teach us something and they create space. If you walk across a paddock that has nothing in it, that is very different from walking through even a small patch of forest. It is a very different experience.
So, Sienna, you've got 2 minutes or just under 2 minutes left.
Thank you. I will wrap up. So I think we need to recognise that trees, whilst we often talk about them as something that is renewable, mature trees are not renewable. Once a mature tree comes down, we don't get it back in our lifetimes. And it's akin to getting rid of all the grandparents and thinking that it's okay, more kids are being born. It's not the same. We need to be planting as many trees as possible, but we need to protect our mature trees as well. And I think that there are things that the council can do inside and outside of the legal framework to address this issue. Because I think we need to be communicating with one another about how to prioritise keeping trees as opposed to cutting them down. And I would really appreciate your understanding and your efforts in trying to make this happen.
Cool,
Thank you
thanks,
very much.
Sienna. And we've got two questions. Malcolm.
Yeah, thanks for coming along and highlighting the issues. I am aware that there's only 0.5% of the forest cover on the Canterbury Plains there was before previous habitation. I'm just interested to know that, are you aware of Te Ara Kakariki and the plant out days where they are regenerating patches of bush and putting a lot of trees back in each year here in Canterbury?
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, and I think we need to be doing this regardless. But we also need to be stopping all of the mature trees that are being cut down.
I just wondered, have you taken advantage of their plant out days at all?
And
have you taken advantage of their plant out days?
Not for Kakariki, but I have for other groups.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Elizabeth and Sophie, sorry, we do need to do quick because we've got another public tour and we've got quite a long, we've got a reasonable agenda to get through. So Elizabeth.
Thank you. Did you study, this is a genuine question, did you study pest trees along or near the waterways? Do you feel that we as council are making the right decisions, clearing and spraying the willows, cherries, the hollies, etc. in our rivers? Are there actual benefits to leaving some of these trees in place?
I'm not an ecologist, so I think I wouldn't be the best to answer that question, but I think that in areas where we have so few trees left, we just need to really weigh up, like, are we doing this for the benefit of the ecology or are we doing this for human convenience's sake? Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Sophie.
Yep. Mine's just a very quick one, just to say thank you very much for coming. We don't get many speakers at these committee meetings, so it's really good to see two speakers for once. But yeah, if you know anybody else who wants to come and speak and provide information, then that's always great as well.
Thank you. And I do think this issue probably needs a little bit more time, so I would love to revisit this at a later date, but thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Shane, I said.
That's all right. I just wanted to point out T201, Sienna, and thank you very much for your corridor. The vegetation and tree management policy is a good read to council's policy.
Yeah, I sent that through to her in my email when I replied. So yeah, about trees. Okay, so our next public forum is Ian McIntosh. It's got Ian Mackenzie on there, actually, McIntosh. Yeah, on the up there.
You're here to help me.
It's closed.
Good.
Is it this one here?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
That one.
That's all right. And to progress to the next one, I can push the left mouse.
Should be able to just.
Oh, just through there. Okay. All right. Am I allowed to talk?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, please do.
sorry, Madam Chair, I was waiting for the queue.
No,
Well,
I'm waiting for you.
okay. Well, in the interest of time, I've written out my bio there, and I'm very open to people interacting with me on this topic. I'm talking to you today on sustainable agriculture. Sorry. A bit closer. How's that? Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. Right. I'm talking to you today on the perspective of sustainable agriculture in the context of climate change. I'm giving you a brief snippet of a 50-minute presentation that I give to community groups. So for the sake of time, some of it might be a bit rushed, but I'm more than happy to come back and talk further about it. This won't work. Here we are. So this biochemical pathway for novices in the room is the photosynthetic pathway, and it's our source of food and oxygen, and 264 grams of carbon dioxide produces 180 grams of glucose and 192 grams of oxygen, and our sun provides 2.87 megajoules of energy to drive that equation. So you'll see there are 6 carbon atoms end up as 6 carbon atoms, 6 carbon atoms from CO2 ends up as 6 carbon atoms in a glucose molecule, and the oxygen that's in CO2 ends up as the oxygen we breathe. And so without CO2, we would starve and suffocate. It is our essential friend. And the carbon that's in the glucose enters the biochemical pathway in these big boards in front of me. You'll see there's a blue circle. That's the glucose molecule, and from there goes all around our biochemical processes. We take a lot for granted as we sit here, but essentially the carbon goes into every organic molecule in your body, our bodies, and it makes up 18.5% of our body mass. CO2 is a plant food. Increasing it increases plant production. This is research from Arizona State University. Ambient at that time was 380 parts per million on the left-hand side, and when they added 450 parts per million to it, if I can move this out of the way, there we are, to end up at 830 ppm, you'll see the growth, the additional growth. And explains why farmers in Canterbury and other parts of the world pump in 1200 ppm CO2 to increase yield. And this is an example of what happens to seedlings on the left-hand side there, 150 ppm on the left and 700 ppm on the right. You'll see that they respond to CO2. And the graphs on the right, we've got oats, beans and wheat there. And essentially plants will die when they get below 50 ppm. So you'll see that plants need ppm, need CO2, and they respond to it. And this is work, this has been around a long time. This is a FAO statement in 1996, stating research in 1993 that of 156 plant species, and found that doubling CO2 provided an average growth increase of 37%. And crudely speaking, with doubling CO2 from 280 ppm before the Industrial Revolution to 560 ppm, we would feed the same number of people with 37% less land. CSIRO in Australia has been studying the effects of the increasing CO2 in our environment, and they've found that the arid areas of the world are greening. And I won't take you why that is, but it's a known fact. And you'll see there that the darker areas in Western Australia, for example, and the bottom of Sahara, they're all responding to extra CO2 that's in the atmosphere. And this is production of food around the world. So there's yield per hectare there. You'll see it's gone up. Now, it's not all due to CO2, but it's certainly a major contributor. And there's the world cereal production. We're not in a crisis at all. Every year we seem to be hitting records. And there's the population. So we're able to feed the world thanks to CO2 in part. Now, it's amazing how such a small concentration of CO2 makes up such a big contribution to life. So the pink portion is CO2, currently forms 0.0417% of our atmosphere on a volume basis. This is the same as 417 parts per million, and it was first measured in Moana Loa in Hawaii in 1958, and it was 313 ppm. And despite being such a small volume, it helps to keep us warm, and without it, we'd freeze. That and the other greenhouse gases The average would be -9 degrees centigrade, and with greenhouse gases at 15.5. And water vapor is the biggest greenhouse gas. Now, I won't go through this in detail, can do, except to say that without greenhouse gases, we would emit 394 watts per square metre. That's the same as 400 watt light bulbs per square metre, radiating heat back to the atmosphere, back to outer space. And when we bring in greenhouse gases with no CO2, we end up with that green line there. So you'll see that there's a warming effect because less energy is escaping. But so here's the CO2 effect right there. But it's the first 50 ppm that makes the difference.
So you've got about 4.5 minutes to go.
Okay, thank you. All right,
So
I'll press
keep
on.
ripping it.
So it's the first 50 ppm that makes the difference. And every time you double CO2 from that point on, it adds 3 watts per square metre. So it's going to take us 200 years to go from where we are now to 800 ppm. So here's some points. If you can see that it isn't CO2, I'm breathing out 40,000 parts per million right now. And can you see it? Well, so why do people use photos like this to malign CO2? That photo shows steam coming out of a chimney. This is man's contribution of carbon to the atmosphere, burning fossil fuels since 1800s. There's the Industrial Revolution. So you see we've added a lot of carbon to the atmosphere. But is it causing a problem? Well, this is Antarctic sea ice. That's 1979 when we first started taking photographs of it. That's 2019. So in 40 years, it's made no difference. Realise though that Antarctica is 90% of the world's ice, and the amount of ice that grows and shrinks every year is an area twice that of Australia. This is, however, the Arctic has a different outcome. We know it's receding, but there's the North Pole in the middle and there's Glacier Bay on the left. We know for a fact from eyewitness accounts, including a guy called Vancouver, that since 1750 it's been in decline. So the ice was melting certainly by 1880. Most of the ice in Glacier Bay, where people go today in cruise liners, most of the ice had gone by 1880. And this is Fox Glacier on the west coast in 1894, and this is 1948, and Cone Rock's got no ice around it at all. So these things were happening a long time ago. So between 1607 and 1815 was a little ice age, which affected us. This is the Thames frozen, and in 1814 to 1815 they could no longer have ice fairs on the Thames, and purely because the climate was warming. So this is the resultant sea level rise. So this is Sydney since 1887. You'll see it's linear. That's France and Italy. This is New York since 1855, and the IPCC agrees that there's been no increase in sea level rise over that time, no rate increase. So if we put the two together about the amount of CO2 we've released and the sea level rise, you'll see that there's no impact. So what will happen to sea level rise if we cut the use of fossil fuel by 84% to 1950 levels? Nothing. What will happen to our economy? A disaster. Our temperature has been slowly going up around the world. That's the 2 minutes, okay? The top line is the model data, and you'll see those blue lines. That's the actual recorded. There's a 200% error, and it's not the maximums that are going up, it's the minimums. And this is what happens in countries that exclude fossil fuel. On the right, they use fossil fuel. On the left, they don't. So which one are we going to leave our children by our policies? So I'll finish there, except to offer that I give talks on this. The question for you as you make decisions is please make sure you've got all the information needed to protect our children and our future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.
Hi, thanks for your contribution. I'm just wanting to ask, are there other scientists around the world that have the same viewpoint as you?
Yes. The man who was Obama's chief science advisor, Professor Coonan, he agrees with what I'm saying. Professor Happer, who was the director of energy research for the American government, who helped to design the lasers that shoot down missiles and satellites. He totally agrees with me. The man who designed the satellite that goes around the globe measuring the Earth's temperature when he was with NASA, Professor John Christie agrees with me, and a very prominent New Zealander, Mike Riley, I think his name is. He's just come back from, he's retired out of the UK back to New Zealand, and he says that we're in for a horrible future, and it won't be one of climate change if we introduce renewables. So there's many, many people who would agree with what I'm saying.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you very much for your presentation. To be honest, I disagree intensely with most of what you've said. The science around climate change is settled. It is happening and it is bad. You showed us a map of where plants are growing due to increased CO2. There's also maps that show where the Earth will be completely uninhabitable if we have more degrees of warming. It doesn't make any difference how many trees you can grow if people can't live because they are dead. Thank you.
Lydia, is it quick? Because that was the time I was going. So quick, if you want.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you believe that we will see a decline in crop yields going forward? And how do we find a way forward with agriculture being blamed for global warming and there's so much conflict and information around?
I don't believe for a minute we'll have a decline in agricultural output. I watch on every day food production around the world, and it's increasing. Australia just had 3 record years of grain production. I don't think we've got any crisis in agriculture around the world if we use the truth. And for 44 years I've done that. In fact, you'll see in my bio that I have an international patent going through with a machine that I've developed. And for 13 years I had to use real science to do it.
Thank you. Got to wrap it up. Thank you for coming. Sorry, we've got very tight timeframes for our meetings. So on to, thank you. So on to the next item is just in terms of reference.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I had a text back from Councillor Dean saying he had sent his apologies in because he's actually at a conference in Auckland.
That's right.
I'm not
I've
sure
forgotten
who
about
sent
that.
it to, but
No,
wanted
he
to add
had
that.
sent an email a while back that was better to send to Secretary. So add Councillor Dean to the apologies. List of apologies. Thank you. Second, all those in favour? Heads carried. Confirmation of minutes, tab 5. Is everyone happy with that? Are there any changes? Seconder?
Yes.
Thank you, Shane. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, I actually want to bring up matters arising. So if you look on, my pages have disappeared. Where chairperson's report is recorded. Actually, they've got the action above it for chairperson. Thank you. The chairperson will prepare a letter and circulate to members. This is about the e-bikes. E-bike rebates. So you all should have received yesterday for a draft of incentivising e-bike uptake across Aotearoa, New Zealand. Is there anyone have any comments about that? I've got it's from Grant Miller, who had requested that we talk about where the money could come from for the rebates, and he has said that he thinks it's a good letter and it has included their funding suggestions. So has anyone else got any comments about that? Sophie.
Yep, I sent through some comments yesterday. I know, sorry, I'm just trying to open up my emails. I would still think it would be appropriate to include a bit more information about cargo bikes, just because they widen up, they widen what you can do with an e-bike. We've got some explanations about why e-bikes are useful in terms of getting you further distance, but in terms of what you can do with your bike, how many people you can carry, how much load you can carry, the different activities you can undertake as opposed to with a car, I think would be worth including in the letter as well, rather than just putting in brackets, this includes cargo variants.
No, I'm happy to include that. Is there anyone else who's got any comments, or particularly in the word you'd put through some wording yesterday that everyone's seen already? Is there any other comments anyone has? And on what Sophie's just raised? Sorry, I'm just conscious that we need to get through this.
Just to agree, I agree. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So we're all happy about that. Do I need to move? I suppose I'll just move this letter that we're accepting the letter. So all those, so I've moving that. A seconder. Sophie, all those in favour? Against, carried. So chairperson's report. That would be me. So, gosh, that was a long. Just sorry. So I take that as read. Is there any comments or questions around that? Lydia, do you have a question or something? No. So
I do.
Yes, Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to second if you've already moved this, your chairperson's report. A very wide-ranging and informative chair's report, and I thank you very much for including the information that's been put. I really enjoyed Sophie Howe, Scordiddle, as an Indigenous Welsh person, and her support of bilingual signage for a start, and also her depth of knowledge in justice and youth justice. And I think that we can learn a lot from her experiences and the conference that was held. I just had a note here somewhere, Madam Chair, and it was just around the, excuse me, let's find it. 0.24 on page 27, the Waka Toa Ora Annual Hui.
Yep.
It really spoke to, I guess, places can foster a sense of belonging and invite participation as part of the kōrero, and it really, I guess, loops back around to communities of interest and how we utilise or take that learning into the representation review as well, and just perhaps thoughts on what potentially we could draw on from that hui as we move through the process of representation review.
That's a good point to raise, Shane, and I'm sure that it's something that can be brought up with the representation review. Some of those committee members are sitting at this table. Actually, just you. Oh no, Shane as well.
No, and myself. I was sorry, Madam Chair. I was just referring to what learnings you or points of interest you took away that can be utilised as part of that representation review.
I don't have any, and it's not really. I think for this committee we don't need to be just discussing that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that's sort of. So thank you. So Shane seconded my report. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. So Robert will talk to the next report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Conscious of time, so we'll go straight into questions. I also have my colleagues from Consents, Building Control and Compliance Monitoring here if you do have any specific questions for them.
And I think we also need to bring up about the momentous Cape district plan is out.
Yeah, we talked about that at the last council meeting, but yeah, the proposed district plan was decisions issued. So we now have a partially operative district plan, also subject to appeal. So that appeal period ends on the 29th of September.
Cool. Thank you. Lydia. Oh, Sophie, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to mention on the topic of the district plan, I just want to make a wee statement of regret in a way that we didn't realise, I don't think, when the independent hearing panels thing and the variation and everything went through, there was not any intention of closing off the appeal against Plan Change 69. And that did happen as a result of our decision. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. That was just that it wasn't intended. And, you know, we can't actually, as far as I'm aware, do anything about it now.
Lydia.
I just wanted to talk about the tree planting policy in the report here. And
Sorry.
Your time's up, Lydia.
Yes. So you better be quick.
standard on a 30-second ban here. I wanted to talk about the sunshade policy in our public spaces, and we'd talked about this at the very first report of this committee to council, and I talked about it in the annual plan. It was a submission from the Melbourne Community Board as well, and I just wanted to see if perhaps we could link that into our tree and vegetation policy and to use trees for sunshade instead of structures. I think it would be be more beneficial for, giving effect to climate change in our environment, and it would sit well alongside that policy. And I feel like planting trees is a much nicer thing to do than building structures. So is it possible to add this to the tree planting policy for discussion or to the action tab?
And I totally agree, Lydia. When it was originally talked about, it was actually tree canopy and it was so that was the fault on myself on not picking up on that is how it changed in the action point to be tree planting. It was more a wider issue, and I think it speaks to the public forum that we've had this morning as well. And I have asked staff to look if there is some interim measures that can be taken to see where we are at, and with respect to what is current trees that are currently there. The district plan does look at some trees, but they need to have a specific they're notable trees, so they have to have a specific reason as to why they're being protected. Is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, there's quite a few work streams here. So at a higher level, we do have a future Selwyn work, which has an offshoot, which is the blue-green network, which sets a strategic direction on what we actually want to see within our spaces from a green perspective. We do have that tree planting policy, but that largely is tree variety on road reserves and reserves, those type of things. It doesn't really set a minimum tree cover. There is the MPSIB, which you'll hear from later on today, which does require 10% IB cover within our urban areas. So quite a significant change to what we've got at the moment. And as the chair indicated, we'll be looking at various things we can do through the RMA processes, things like subdivision resource consent requirements around minimum percentages of tree cover when you do subdivide, and those type of things.
Cool. Thank you. Shane.
Are you conscious of time? Thank you, Madam Chair. Just point 3, the Christchurch airport noise contour update. And anything that could be seen negative or adversely positive through that update. And also just what is it, page 33, future Selwyn strategy in the Aqualink report. How are we collaborating with Taumatu, Ngaitiru Hiki at a practical level? We a few of us attended that hui up there regarding that climate change effects and the I guess inundation of water in that area, and how we're working together on that. The SDC staff travel survey.
Sorry, what was that, Shane? You just got to
page 33, future Selwyn strategy and Aqualink report.
Yep.
Are we working with Taumatu? How are we working with mana whenua in that strategy? SDC staff travel survey. What effect does electric vehicles have on that survey? If we're measuring vehicle kilometres travelled, does an electric vehicle, just where does that sit in terms of emissions or kilometres used? At the bottom of that page before the tree planting, it's referenced that possibly the climate change policy will no longer be needed due to the coverage of the other, well, at this point, their strategies. So my question is, policies replaced by strategies. I'm not too sure, as Deborah has referenced a number of times, policies are council policies or council laws policies, and I'm just unsure as to whether that is the correct option to take. Thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, just before you answer that question, I'm aware that some of those comments were around the proposed district plan with regards to the airport contours, given that there's still 30 days for appeal in this process. I consider it a live process, and I wish to record that I will be stepping away from the table. I will also be stepping away from the table in the adoption of Plan Change 79 as well, or the decline of 79, or the discussion on that particular basis, that the 30-day appeal day is still open, and it's a live issue. Thank you.
And that is actually something that could be said for myself as well, which actually means that we don't have a quorum for doing that agenda item. Unfortunately.
It's an apology.
Well, we don't have a.
I don't know what is even an apology.
But the sorry, Sophie, you've already spoken.
Yeah.
Deborah's spoken. So Councillor Miller has brought up with me as a concern about, pardon?
Do you want me to respond to Shane?
Yeah, you can respond to Shane.
I think Shane, there's quite a bit there to unpack, so I'll try to cover it all. If I miss anything, let me know. So airport noise contours, largely it's just a FYI that they've completed the peer review process of those contours. They've released it to the public, but largely will factor in the RPS review next year, late next year. There are different settings which we'll be looking at, which when we do make a submission, will be coming to council to workshop. You know, do we use the 50 versus the 55 decibel? Do we use the 3 monthly average or the annual average, or do we look at an avoid policy under it or a mitigate policy? So there's a long road, and it's largely to do with the presentation that we've got later on with the RPS review. The Aqualink report, I can't tell you whether that's involved Tomutu consultation or not. It largely sits with Murray England and his infrastructure property wing. Unfortunately, he's not here today to answer that question, but I'm sure he can answer it another time for you. The staff travel survey, I don't think it went into what actually propelled the vehicles. I think it's just more that there are vehicle movements, how people getting to work, from work, and what we can do to try reduce those travels. Is it all of your points?
Policies.
Yeah, so I guess this is a terminology thing across whole of council, where some people's strategies, another person's policy, another person's action plan. So strategy and policies can be quite closely linked. Some will actually go straight into action. So we'll have future Selwyn in the future. So there's a higher level strategic direction of what we do in that climate change space. Then we'll have action plans under that, like the emissions reductions plan that Ked Talantai is leading up at the moment. Look at council related emissions and reduction of that, and various things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so to move that, I'll move that report. A seconder, Lydia. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. So plan change 79. Well, we don't.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Pardon?
Point of order. We have had legal opinion that now we are this far through the process that those of us who are commissioners do no longer have to step back from the table. And yet we are still, some of you are still insisting that you do. We are in an appeal period. We are not hearing that appeal. We have made the decisions as a panel and around the table as independent, with the independent commissioners, those decisions have been accepted by this council. I think the need to carry on in such a manner and remove ourselves from the table has passed.
Are you
We've had a legal opinion to tell us that.
Are you moving, Malky? Happy to move?
I'm happy to move.
I'm happy to second, Madam Chair.
All those in favour?
All right.
Aye. Against? Carried. Yep, you can, councillor Hassan. Okay, next item. Draft tourism environment action plan. So this was being circulated, you've all seen. The what? Didn't we just do that?
No questions for Adrian.
Sorry. Oh, you, the tourism, I think you're doing plan change and that was right. Cool, all good. You can, Ben. Thank you.
Good. Thanks. I don't think we need to spend much time on this. Ryan here drafted the submission along with Shay and the economic team there. This plan here is from MB's building on their industry transformation plan. It all kind of aligns with the stuff that we're trying to achieve here at council as well. And that's largely what our submission said. So, and that submission has been submitted. Yeah. So yeah, the question here is, submission's been submitted. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the decision sort is around whether we support that or ask for it to be withdrawn.
So this was this been circulated when it was being drafted. Unfortunately, with the timing of all of these different submissions that we have, and it doesn't fit in nicely with our council meeting times. They don't obviously respect that, but anyway, you've all had a look over it. It's not a surprise to you, and have had the opportunity to contribute and give comments. Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move both the recommendations and thank the team for putting the submission together. Shay and yourself, Brian, I have mentioned that. I just wanted to say that I love the word tirohanga ho, and looking at the 6 potential new pathways. It's a beautiful kupu, and the submission actually it didn't have, and it's retrospectively now, so it's a bit late, but to skiing or winter sports. And I guess it's given that we're mountains to the sea, it's quite obvious that it's in there, but making a point around that. I definitely have seen an uplift in tourism. I was up at Castle Hill on the weekend, and man, the Kuratawhiti car park was packed. It's pretty hard to get in there. So we're experiencing a lot of growth in that area at the moment. So long may it continue. Thank you very much for your work. And Selwyn, here we are. Thank you.
So I have a seconder. Okay. Malcolm, all those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So thank you, you two. So the next report is the alcohol reports. Malcolm, did you want to come up? Oh, is it Sue? Is it Sue? No, yeah, Malcolm. Sorry, you're trapped. Yes. We've got the reports before us. Is there anything that you want to add, Malcolm? Or highlight in the reports?
Yep. Good morning. You'll see a reference in my June report to a matter, a Selwyn bottle store that sold vodka to a 16 and a 17-year-old. They were appearing in court in August. Well, that case was held yesterday. I prosecuted the case. That was an experience. It's a reserved decision, and I'll let you know how that goes when the decision comes out. should come out in probably 6 to 8 weeks, hopefully. But other than that, take the reports as read, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Other Malcolm, please.
Yes, welcome. I'm aware of the Famous Grouse Hotel issues with its licence. Has that gone to hearing yet, or is that still in the process?
And I'm understanding that that will be going to hearing at the end of October.
Thank you.
Lydia.
Thanks, Malcolm. Great report. Hey, are you happy to share with us the results of what happens with some of the other decisions that are made before this committee next meets?
Yeah, absolutely. Once a decision's made on any matter, once it's made, I'll be happy to share what the result is.
Cool, thank you. It just helps in our community when we get approached.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some things that are dealt with by ALA, that's the Alcohol Regulatory Licensing Authority. We're still waiting for a decision from June 2022, which was a straightforward decision, I felt, and we're still waiting for that decision. So there can be delays, not on our part, but
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
but for sure.
Shane.
I think it was, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just thank you very much, Malcolm, for the report and noticing the increase in manager certificates. Certainly a good sign that people are becoming more qualified as managers. And the question really revolves around that, and what are we seeing as a culture of the district around alcohol?
Yeah, so what we're observing is a very good, responsible culture in terms of alcohol and addressing alcohol-related harm. So having certified managers, and a lot of certified managers, is excellent because they are fully trained. You know, when persons go into a licensed premises, it's great to have somebody that actually knows what it's all about in terms of addressing alcohol-related harm, monitoring minors, monitoring intoxication, and ensuring that there's a lot of compliance going on. So it's a very good sign, Councillor, and it's a good point.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. So I don't think I've done a mover and second it. I'll move it. As got a seconder. Sophie, thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you so much for that, Malcolm. And that is the end of the public part of our meeting. So thanks to anyone who's online watching, listening.
I'll move that resolution for you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. A seconder. Oh, sorry, Elizabeth. I'm going to sleep. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. So we'll just wait until the live stream finishes.